Hey everybody, welcome back to The Hobby Musician. Now you can see we're already in it. We've got multiple screens going because right now we are currently in the middle of a custom build. We're working on our single cut fretless bass, and it's come time in that building process to really think about and plan out what we're going to do with the pickups. Now longtime viewers of the channel know that we have done tons of episodes where we build our own pickups. We 3D model and 3D print all the components, and then we wind all the wire ourselves. But I was going back through those old videos and to prepare for this one, and I realized that I have certainly described what I do with the 3D modeling, but I've never actually shown it to you. So I want to remedy that today. You can see here that we are actually going to start from a blank canvas. That's what you're seeing here. And I'm going to go through, we need to build 4 parts for this particular design that I've got in mind. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to structure this video where I'll kind of describe the parts as we go, and then I'll fade out and I'll kind of cut it into a time lapse so you can see it all happening on the screen. But because some of it takes a while, I don't want you sitting there and getting bored. Now, one quick note about what I'm using. I'm actually using OnShape, but that is only one example of the many types of software out there. So if you want to try this for yourself and you have access to a different type of program, that's totally fine. You'll just kind of see how I approach things. All right, the first part that I need to make, I'm going to start with the outer housing. That's kind of that big shell rectangular casing. Well, they're usually rectangular shaped, that everything else fits into. Now, the reason I do that is because if I can get the dimensions of that set, I can then use that part itself as almost a template for all the parts that I need to fit inside of it, and it makes things a little bit easier. So that's what I'm going to get going here. So sit tight, enjoy the show, and I'll be back in a sec to talk about it. There is our first part done. As you can see on here, we've got that outer shell. Now you kind of notice as I was going through, there's only a few operations that I really had to do. I started with kind of a basic rectangular shape, and then I used some of the circle tools to both place, you can see the holes that I've got put in there for where I'm going to put my mounting screws. And I also used the same kind of circle tools to round off the edges. Well, once I made the outer rectangle, I just extruded it. That just means thicken it out to a three-dimensional block. Then I made a second rectangle, slightly smaller, with the dimensions that I wanted for the walls. And then instead of extruding it and making it solid, you can invert that feature. You can extrude it and make it subtract. So it kind of ends up scooping out the inner thing, and that's what we've got here on the screen. Now, like I said, this is always my first thing because I can now use this part that's already there, and I can start to build my next parts and use these dimensions and all the simplifying tools that they have. So the second part we're going to build, I'm going to go right now and I'm going to build the bottom cover that I want to have, so it's got to line up some of the holes and everything. And I didn't mention before, but I am using this 4 screws in the corners method. Typically and more traditionally, you'll see pickups, they only have 1 screw on either side. But I've had some trouble with that in the way that I wind my coils. I end up just needing a little more space on the sides, so I'm moving my screws out to the corners for this particular build. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get that back cover made, and then we'll come back and talk about the next part. Okay, we got our second part done. And as we said, this is the back plate that's going to kind of go on and sandwich. Once we've got all the internal guts in there, we want this to come along and cover everything up. So a couple notes about this. You'll notice that it is all the same dimensions as the outer the largest dimensions of that first part we made, and by using kind of those center points, it's so much easier to come back with the tools in the software that I could just very quickly reproduce a lot of those circles so that they perfectly match up with the screw holes in the corner. Now you notice that one of the features here, if I zoom in, I've got this little half moon shape. Well, that half moon shape is there to allow the wires to come out. So we're going to have a signal wire and a ground wire coming out of our pickups. And so we can't have a completely enclosed, just shell. We need somewhere for those wires to come out. Now, the beauty of this is because the whole part is perfectly symmetric. So depending on where those wires end up coming, I don't need to put a half moon. I don't need to know which side it's on, because I could take that back plate and flip it upside down or right side up, left or right, and those four, it's all of the screw holes are going to match up because it's a symmetric piece. So that's another really nice thing about doing this kind of design process. All right, the third part that we're going to make a bobbin piece. Now, the bobbins are the internal, it's like two sandwiches. So they're very thin, kind of like this back plate, but they're going to have all of the spacings where we're going to insert our magnets, or the magnet pole pieces that we use. And we need to have, dual magnets. I like, in my single coils, I like to have a magnet on either side of the string. So we got to line up circles for that, and then we've got to space it out. This is a 5-string design. So we've got to space everything out at the correct string spacings. And so you'll kind of see that as we go. And then, all right, we'll get on to that, and we'll come back and talk about it a little more after we get done. All right, here we go. Is our third part all sorted and finished. As you can see here, it's kind of like we talked about. There are these sets of holes that go down, and using kind of those tools, you kind of saw that I was taking a lot of time, and I used the dimension tool that OnShape has to make sure that I could input exactly the sizes of the circles and then exactly the distance from the center of one set to the next. The string spacing on the bridge that I have is just a little under 19 millimeters, so I was at about 18.8. So it's super easy in software like this to just tell it to put all those things starting at the middle, which is a nice thing about a 5-string. There's always one string right in the middle, and then move out 18.8 millimeters on the other sides. Now you also see I did a lot of these like half moon shapes all around the edges, in addition to notching out the 4 corners so that when it's shoved up in there, those screws can go all the way down from the corners and they're not going to interfere with anything. Well, the reason that I did all these half moon shapes out here is more of an economic choice. We're going to be 3D printing these, and the bobbins themselves, they just have to have those holes kind of lined up with the top one and the bottom one. But in terms of material, it doesn't need to be solid. And because 3D printers use like plastic filament, this is economic. You're actually saving material and saving money by carving out any substance or any material on the part that you don't technically need. So that's a common thing that I do to a lot of mine, just to be economic about the whole process. Now, I keep saying that I need a top and a bottom. The good news about these, they're completely symmetric. So I can only model one of these, but I can send it to the 3D printer and tell it, just like any printer, print me 2 copies. That way it comes out, I do all this work once, and it gives me the 2 pieces that when I hold them up to each other, all of those posts are going to line up just the way they need to be. Now, the last part that we're going to build is a little bit interesting. Now you can make, these are all the parts for a single coil pickup. What I have in mind for this build is a little creative. I want to also build a humbucker pickup, but I specifically want the humbucker pickup to be able to be interchangeable in size. I want to be able to use these housings, and from the outside, an observer would look at the base and not know what's inside, just to be able to see, is it a single coil or is it a humbucker? So the 4th part is I'm going to build a half bobbin that's only going to occupy half of the internal space, and I'm going to cut it down to 1 post, 1 magnetic post per string. Again, to allow myself to be able to print those out and experiment. If I like the single coil sound better, I can, make a second single coil. Or if I like the humbucker sound better, I can make a second humbucker. So that's kind of the creative twist to this. So as you can see here, yeah, I'm going to start just like I've done all the other pieces. I'm going to start with that and then come back at the end to wrap up this video. Okay, that is our last part. We've got all 4 things that we need for this custom pickup project. And as I was talking about before, my idea for this humbucker, you can see here I've only put single holes in this piece, and I'll zoom in a little bit here. But the reason for that is that with 2 coils, you still get kind of the same number of magnets. But by making it half as big, I can make a tiny sandwich and wind this coil independently. I can just print out multiple parts and make a second sandwich and wind them and then wire them together to make that humbucker. And the dimensions are such that 2 of those together, like a humbucker normally sits, would still fit into this overall housing. So all in all, this really is a quick and easy way to kind of custom design parts for any kind of build you have. You can get crazy with your dimensions, or you can get pretty standard like this. The last note I'll make is that you can see here I've gone through and actually specifically made all of the edges rounded over and curved. That's just a little pro tip. If you're going to try this out, rounding out your edges, even though they're the exact dimensions, can really help in the sliding in and the sliding out. When you have a whole wind of copper wire and you got magnets and everything, even though the dimensions are exact to each other, if those edges are flat, that's more surface area that drags on that outer shell. By rounding them out, you actually reduce the surface area. Only a tiny fraction touches the side, so you can test fit things and pull them out if you need to and remake something if that happens. Well, just again, I'll kind of scroll back out here. So that's kind of the project from start to finish. That is how I go about designing my parts for these custom pickups. And as I said before, you only have to do these things once, and you can tell the printer how many copies of this. I'm going to have 2 pickups in the base, so I'll print off 2 of the shells and that kind of stuff. So I hope you got something out of this episode. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, until next time, play on, my friends, play on.